Do churches actually know what they're doing when it comes to spending money? Many members are often surprised when they learn how much their church spends just to keep the lights on, which means that a lot of people ask the question, how much does it take to run this church? So just how big does your church budget actually need to be? The answer might surprise you. And so in today's video, I thought it would be helpful to discuss the concept of the size of your budget. This is episode 3 of our church budget series, where we are putting together a church budget template. We're not just putting together a template, but we are taking it piece by piece and discussing each concept and major idea as we go throughout this process. If that sounds like something you're interested in, you can check out our previous videos. You can subscribe for our future videos in this series. You can leave a like and comment if that's your thing. But with that out of the way, let's dig into today's video. My name is Michael, and I have worked for many years with churches and religious nonprofits, primarily in their budgeting process. And I'm excited to move forward in this series and providing you guys with the knowledge and the skills required to tackle your church budget so that you can be more knowledgeable and, more importantly, be more confident in your church's budget. So just how big should your church budget be? First, we need to look at some historical data. You need to ask yourself, how much did we bring in unrestricted gifts last year? How does that compare to the year before that, and then even going a few years back? Historical data is certainly a great starting point, but it cannot be the end of our discussion. So if we just copy and paste our budget from last year, we're setting ourselves up to fail, which is why I encourage you to build your church's budget up each year from the ground up to ensure two things. Number one, it gives you an opportunity to provide some kind of leadership oversight to manage the spending and really the performance of the various ministries going on in your church. And secondly, and this is kind of a bigger picture, it gives you an opportunity to exercise proper stewardship over your church's finances by examining your church's legacy costs in an effort to possibly reduce them, looking at the various fixed costs of your church, etc. Once again, a church budget that is copied and pasted from last year is already set up to fail. We don't want to do that. We want to start building from the ground up. And a good starting point is looking at how much was given to the church last year. You have to know what you're starting with. So let's start with a conservative framework. Let's say our church brought in $1 million last year. Conservatively, and when I say conservatively, I mean low risk, I would like for you to budget 90% of what you brought in last year. This is an ideal framework that I have found that works for the most amount of churches. Number one, because it is conservative. Simply put, it is low risk. So if giving is not ideal, it's not what you expected, you still have a plan and a framework by which to operate. And planning on the front end for these budget cuts, if you will, is going to save you a lot of stress and a lot of headaches as opposed to having to make them halfway through next year. So you may ask, how do I do this? I'm going to say your expenses are categorized into two different categories. The first ones, your fixed costs, are a lot harder to manipulate. It's in the name, they're fixed. Some examples of fixed costs are payroll expenses, rent payments, insurance payments, some facilities costs, etc. The second category is our variable costs. Also given by the name, these costs are variable. They have a lot more flexibility with them. Some examples of our variable costs are usually related to our ministries and our programs. If we do any advertising or events, some of our contract laborers could even fall into this category. So those are our two categories, if you will. We have fixed and we have our variable. There is a gray area. I would advise that you start examining here in the gray area. And in here you can find costs such as utilities or other facilities related expenses such as janitorial services or products. In the gray area, you can also find costs such as software subscriptions, some of your contract laborers as well. if you can't really determine if they are fixed or variable, they probably lean more towards variable in the sense that it's not necessary for you to have this expense in order to run your church, and it gives you some flexibility to kind of play with it, if you will. Now, if you budget conservatively, the hope is that giving is what you expect and you have a larger surplus at the end of the year, and you should have a plan for your surplus, a long-term plan, if you will. We can dump it into savings, we can dump it into a particular fund, we can split it up, do a 60-30-10 rule like I discussed in one of my previous videos, but just have a plan for the surplus. So that's the conservative model, budget for 90% of what you brought in last year. Additionally, and really it doesn't cause more work on you or your ministry leaders, you can create a stretch budget to go along with your conservative budget. A stretch budget simply accounts for and plans in the event of a surplus of giving in real time. So we roll out additional expenses if we hit certain benchmarks in our giving metrics throughout the year, which means that in April, if we are above where we had planned to be in gifts received, we can start rolling out plans for our ministries in real time. We don't have to wait for next year's budget and make a case that this giving trend will continue. So a lot of our expenses in our variable cost category can actually be fit into our stretch budget, which is really helpful because in this, we're not necessarily cutting expenses. We are taking them out of the main course, if you will, and moving them to dessert, and treating them as if they are a bonus. If we give this much, then that will unlock this tier of expenses. So budget for 90, which means that if giving is down, you have a plan, and then create a stretch budget for an additional 10 or 20%, which means that if giving is up, then you also have a plan. Which means that you must also become knowledgeable in analyzing the giving trends and metrics of your church. Know that giving slows down in the summer and spikes and surges at year's end. As a church leader, you should have a proper understanding of the state of the financial health of your church. If you don't, that really does necessitate another video. We'll certainly make that very soon, but it includes a lot of metrics, such as how much money does your church have in savings? Could it cover 1 or 2 months of operating expenses, or could it cover up to 6, 7, or 8? Or how has your total gifts measured up to last year? How about 3 years prior, 5 years prior? Are you growing in total gifts? Are you remaining stagnant? Are you declining? But not just total gifts, also compare your gifts on a per capita basis. So how much money does the average attendee or member give to your church? Or break it down by family unit rather than individual. Lastly, how much money comes from your top 5 contributors? What percentage of your total income comes from your top 5, top 10? All of these are metrics of your church's financial health, which is just another way of saying how risk tolerant your church can afford to be. If your church is in a healthy financial position, it can take on a little more risk, which means that it doesn't need to budget for 90%, maybe 95, closer to 100. Again, that should demand another video. But for now, that does wrap up our 3rd episode in our budget series. Next week, we dive into the expenses side of our budget, and we dive into one particular category, the compensation of our staff. You won't want to miss it. So leave a comment if you found this video helpful, like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.